and I'm sure everyone would like to know what your question is. So please feel free. And I'm joined today by our world-class education programs manager. His name is Mr. Kevin Barras, and he's going to be giving a fantastic presentation today. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Mr. Kevin.
Cool. Thanks so much. Yeah, I've got you for the next 45, 55 minutes or so, and I'll do my best to use that time responsibly. Thank you for being here. It's very much appreciated. We are recording the class, and so we'll make that available afterwards in case anyone joins late or gets kicked off halfway through, or you just want to send it to all your friends because you're so excited about this presentation. So today we're talking about e-bikes specifically. As some background, we as the San Diego County Bicycle Coalition teach classes of all types all across the county. So I've been to Navy and Coast Guard and a bunch of tech companies and pharmaceutical companies. But today we've got sort of a catch-all format. So you probably see some familiar faces in the participants window and some ones that you don't recognize as well. We've got participants from all across the county. So thank you all for being here. We teach basic classes for kids. We teach basic, intermediate, and advanced classes for adults. Some of those are 1 hour, some are 3, some are multiple days. Today is sort of an introduction to the format, and specifically an introduction to the topic of e-bikes, electric bicycles. There's a lot of talk about them, and they're not going anywhere. So you might as well get as educated about them as you can. And so that's our goal for today. That being said, here are the basic topics I hope to cover. My primary goal is making you smarter. My secondary goal is getting you all out of here before 1 p.m. So that's my goal. The things that I plan on talking about, the things that I most often get asked to talk about are the different types of e-bikes that exist and what are their differences, the specifics of how to use those different types of e-bikes, including the throttle and how that works. Making sure your bike doesn't get stolen is a primary concern for people, so that gets included here. The specifics of where to ride. There are some slight differences depending on the type of e-bike and just depending on your level of comfort, your level of, your speed relative to the speed of traffic around you. We'll go into all that. Infrastructure, so specific signs and signals that you may see on the road. There's a bunch of new stuff out there. There's green paint, there's striped lines, there's signs, there's all kinds of stuff. And as much information, as much effort as was put into installing these things, that same amount of effort I don't think was put into education. And so that's where we come in. I oftentimes get asked about carrying 2 people on an e-bike, and so I have that as a specific slide as well. And then I love to include the highlights of the specifics of remaining visible on the road. I used to hear when I was a kid that, the best thing for a bike rider is to ride like no one can see you. If you stay out of people's way and assume that no one's ever going to be able to see you, that's going to keep you safest. That's the opposite of what we teach. And so I'll talk about why that's the case. And then, of course, I can't get through any of our classes that we teach without talking about helmets. So that will be included as well. If you were worried that I wasn't going to talk about something, now would be the time to put that in the chat. If you came for a specific reason and you wanted to make sure that that specific piece of information was covered, again, feel free to put that in the chat. Elizabeth will be covering that aspect of it and bringing topics to the class's attention as well. So don't be shy. So let's start with the specific types of e-bikes that exist. I've listed 3 here. In theory, there's sort of a 4th, and that would be everything else. I've been to bike shops and seen things sold that are essentially electric motorcycles. They exist, they don't have pedals, and they look more like a motorcycle than a bicycle, but you can buy them from stores. They're not street legal. I'm speaking generally here. They're not street legal. Those are designed for off-road usage, private property usage. They're not designed for commuting to work. What we're talking about are bicycles which have some form of assist with them. In that category, there are 3. Class 1 and Class 2 are very similar when it comes to their top assisted speed, which is 20 miles per hour, and are different in how that speed happens. Class 2 e-bikes have a throttle of some kind. That can be a motorcycle wrist style throttle. It can be a thumb throttle. There's a couple different ways to activate it. But without the existence of that throttle, you've got a Class 1 e-bike. With the existence of that throttle, you've got a Class 2 e-bike. Can a Class 1 or Class 2 e-bike go faster than 20 miles per hour? Yes. I can go faster than 20 miles per hour on a bike that has no motor on it at all because I'm very strong. I have big, thick leg muscles. It's very impressive. I won't stand up, so you won't get to see them. So it's the top assisted speed. It's the top speed that the motor will push you. And after that, if you're going downhill, if you're pushing the pedals very hard in the right gear, then yes, absolutely, it's possible to go faster than 20. Class 3 e-bikes are defined almost exclusively by the fact that they have that top assisted speed of 28 miles per hour. Now, on paper, the difference between 20 and 28 is 8. In reality, the difference between getting passed by someone going 20 miles per hour and being passed by someone going 28 miles per hour feels like a lot more than just 8. So for that reason, those e-bikes that have that top speed of 28 miles per hour have some specific rules associated with them. One is you have to be a certain age in order to use them, period. 2 is you have to wear a helmet regardless of what your age is. And then the other is there's some specifics of where you're encouraged to use them. The idea being that you, regardless of what speed limits are, should generally be using these devices at the speed which is similar to the speed of traffic around you. If you're in a car and you're driving on a street and everyone around you is going 20 miles per hour, you should probably also be going close to 20 miles per hour, even though in a car you have the ability to reach a top speed of 140 miles per hour. That's not usually what people are doing. And the same concept applies to e-bikes. Your speed relative to the speed of traffic around you is one of the most important parts. There's a bunch of specific rules. There's a bunch of specific data when it comes to this stuff. I'm putting this here not with the expectation that you memorize every single one of these cells. Don't worry about it. There's not going to be a test later. I will only highlight here the Class 3 e-bike, which has this recommended limit, this required limit of the Class 1 bike path is not a place where it's recommended. A bike path is essentially defined by its lack of cars. So this is something like the San Diego River Trail. This is like the Coastal Rail Trail, a facility where there is no car traffic at all. And so you'll often see people walking, jogging, often with dog leashes that are way too long, and biking. So in this situation like that, where the general speed of traffic is lower, that's not a place where you'd recommend a faster moving e-bike to be. If you're moving 28 miles per hour and the cars are moving 28 miles per hour, I would say you should probably put your bike closer to where the cars are. Everyone's moving at a similar speed, everyone's comfortable, everyone can see what's going on, and everyone's predictable. So with that said, knowing the specific speed limit of the road that you're on is obviously important. But again, I would argue more important is paying attention to your speed relative to the speed of traffic around you. So on a boardwalk, on a slow moving pedestrian area where a bunch of people are walking, but they have said that you're allowed to use your bike or your e-bike, you have the ability to go faster. The speed limit is a number that's even higher. But more important is how fast is everybody else around me moving? Cars are sold with the ability to go 140 miles an hour or more. There's no upper limit that we've required of these devices that weigh, 6,000 to 7,000 pounds. There is a speed limiter on these e-bikes, and we can talk about why that's important or not on another time. But the idea is relative speed is the most important part. The specifics of how you use that throttle is also important. I love having a Class 2 e-bike. I love having the throttle on my bicycle. It's designed for a certain purpose. And my anecdote about this is that it was my sister-in-law. The first time we got her on an e-bike, it was out front. She said she wanted to try it. She went around the block 3 times without pedaling even once. And I understand why. It's fun to treat an e-bike like a motorcycle. However, an e-bike is not a motorcycle. That throttle is there specifically to get you up to speed. I love having it for that purpose. When I'm waiting at a red light and the cars are waiting at the red light next to me and the light changes, I can immediately move at the same speed as everybody else around me, as opposed to taking time to get up to speed. And so once I'm at speed, I'm off the throttle and I'm using the pedals to move through space. And it's a great way to control the power that you're getting from the bicycle. If you're using it like a motorcycle, it'll wear down a lot faster. The brakes will wear down faster. The motor will wear down faster. The battery will wear down faster. You won't be able to use it for as long on individual trips. All these things are negatives, and they're not designed. The bike isn't designed to be used like a motorcycle. It's designed to be used like a bicycle. So that's something to remember. Let me jump to my slide that has too many words on it, but while I'm talking, you can read at the same time. So there's a couple different topics here when it comes to where you're using these devices. If I wanted to do a whole hour just on this one slide, I probably could. And so there's things that I'm going to skip over when I'm talking about this topic. But one thing to remember is that bicycles are allowed to use all the same facilities that cars are allowed to use. There's a catchphrase of roads are for people, not just people in cars. And so this applies. I mean, the next time you get on a freeway on-ramp, you'll see a sign that specifically says bikes aren't allowed to use this place. But by default, the roads exist to move people, not just to move cars. That being said, it is oftentimes people's preference to use a facility which is specifically dedicated to bicycles. So a class 1 bike path, a class 2 bike lane, things that are specifically designed for bicycles make people feel more comfortable. And as a general rule, that's probably where you should be. If you're on a street that has a bike lane in it, you should probably be in that bike lane. There are reasons to leave the bike lane. If there's debris, if it's striped so close to parked cars that you could be hit by a car door, bushes overgrown, if you're planning on turning left, any number of things. But it's a good indicator to everyone around you and to yourself that this is probably the right place to be. The specifics of e-bikes operating off-road get pretty complicated. There's another organization that exists in San Diego called the San Diego Mountain Bike Association. They're good friends of ours, and they have all the information that you would need about riding e-bikes on trails. It gets pretty specific with whether that land is state-owned, city-owned, county-owned, private land. There's different rules about which specific trails are allowed to be used by which specific types of bikes. So if you are planning on going off-road, I would look to them for that specific information. The big point to remember, and I know you're all diligently taking notes as I talk, the point to highlight here is predictability. Being predictable. Part of the reason I'm talking about laws, part of the reason I'm talking about best practices is it's more likely that everybody gets along. It's more likely that everybody gets where they want to go in a manner that works for everybody if we know what to expect before it happens. So I can reasonably expect that a car that's approaching a red light will stop at that red light. I can reasonably expect that a car or a bike that is in the right-hand turn lane is going to be turning right. And anytime, I know for a fact, a lot of times when crashes occur, they occur because someone assumed something. I assumed that they would see me. I assumed that they were paying attention, whatever else. So if you can put yourself in a position where, I guess my main goal with these presentations, with all of them, is I want you to know what the laws are, but I also want you to know what it is that people expect you to do, because sometimes those can be two different things. But then I also want you to know what in reality will actually keep you the safest. Know the law, know what people expect, and know what actually keeps you the safest. I've had the question of, oh, on Friars Road, there's the green paint that goes across what is essentially a freeway on-ramp. And someone said, well, who has the right of way in that situation? And I said, the answer to that question isn't as important as you think it is. The most important, what you're really asking is how can I be the safest in that situation? What can I do that makes me the safest? And that has very little to do with who has the specific right of way, and a lot to do with communication and lane positioning and all the other things. Again, I'm skipping over a lot of stuff and I'm very aware of that, but in the interest of time, I'm moving to my next slide, which is an extension of that one. When I do presentations in elementary schools, when I do presentations in middle schools and high schools, one of the things that I've found is effective, and this extends to you adults as well, is this concept of, are you treating this device like a toy, or are you treating this device like a vehicle? And if you want to get an e-bike and use it like a toy and only take it around the vacant lot and build little jumps for yourself or whatever it is, use it like a toy, that's one thing. When you're on the street, when you're using a facility that other people are using as well, when you're using this device to get somewhere from point A to point B, now you're in our realm. This is what the Bike Coalition focuses on, is getting from point A to point B by bicycle. And if you're doing that, the idea is the more you act like the driver of a vehicle, the more you act like you're supposed to be there, the more likely it is that you're treated like you're supposed to be there. Acting like you're invisible is a good way to make sure that no one sees you. People don't tend to hit things that they see. People don't tend to be surprised by things that they see. So putting yourself in a position which makes you visible, and as discussed with a class 3 e-bike moving at 28 miles per hour, if all the traffic around you is moving slower or at that same speed, putting yourself closer to where that traffic is makes a lot of sense. Roads are for people, not just people in cars. I was asked to include a specific slide about the new laws for 2023, because there have been some new laws. Isn't that exciting? The one in the middle there is the most applicable to this specific presentation. You may have heard previously about a requirement that cars give 3 feet of space when passing. I think that's a great rule. I also think it's very hard to judge what 3 feet of space actually is when driving a car. From experience, it's tough for me to tell. However, I can always tell when I am passed by a car while bicycling. I can always tell if the person driving that car is a bicyclist themselves. Because if I get very little space, I know that person probably doesn't even know how to ride a bike. But if they give me a whole bunch of space, I know that they ride often. And speaking of giving a whole bunch of space, the new rule is, and again, I'm paraphrasing and not quoting the specific vehicle code. The idea is, if there's space, if it's safe, if you have the ability to, when you're approaching a bicyclist, if you have the ability to change lanes completely in order to pass them and do so safely, then that is what you should do. It's one of those things that to me feels like common knowledge, but common knowledge is not as common as we think it is, I think. And that's something that I've learned talking to people and doing these presentations. So if you have the ability to change lanes when passing a bicyclist, then that is probably a good idea. It's tough to judge what 3 feet of space is. And even, I mean, I've had the question of, oh, well, the bicyclist is in the bike lane. Do I still have to give them 3 feet of space? And a good answer is, the amount of space that you give me, the feeling of that, the level of safety that I'm given with that amount of space doesn't change based on whether there's paint on the ground or not. So being passed with less than 3 feet of space feels bad, regardless of whether there's a piece of paint on the ground which delineates the bike lane or not. So in general, giving more space than you think when passing a bicyclist is a good idea. We're getting into the topic of lane positioning when we talk about this, when we talk about bicycles being in the middle of the road. Why is this bicyclist in the middle of the road? As an e-bike user, you're moving faster, generally speaking, through space. And so you might find yourself closer to the center of the road because that's where you feel safest. Maybe you find yourself closer to the right-hand edge of the road because that's where you feel safest. There's a couple different signs, there's a couple different pieces of infrastructure that you can pay attention to which address this specific topic. So when it comes to signs, there used to be signs that said share the road. And I still see them every once in a while, but I see them a lot less often because it turns out that that sign is a lot more ambiguous, I think, than it's designed to be. You know, the guy in the big truck, you know, squeezes by me while I'm riding my bike and yells, "Hey, share the road, buddy." That's not what that means. So instead, we see signs that say bicyclists may use full lane. It's less ambiguous, and it goes to this specific symbol. In the chat, and Terry, I did get your question, so I will address that in just a second. Right now, because I'd like to see some audience participation, I assume you've seen this symbol in the middle of the slide, this black symbol here with a picture of a bicycle, a drawing of a bicycle, and 2 chevrons on top of it. They're all over the place in San Diego City, especially, and across the county. They're getting rolled out to more and more locations as well. So assuming that you have seen this before, either if you know for sure, go ahead, tell me what it means. If you think you might know what it means, go ahead and put that in the chat. If you have no idea, but you can tell that this is supposed to communicate something, tell me what it's communicating to you. What are you assuming that this means when you see it on the road? I'd like to see specific answers, and I'd like you to put them in the chat now, so that we can get some feedback. And it's always interesting because I get different answers every time. So this black and white symbol here, the 2 V's, the 2 chevrons on top, picture of a bicycle in the middle, you've seen them painted on the road. When you see them, what is it that you assume that they mean? Or if you know for sure, tell me what it is for sure that it means. The 2 most common answers I get, oh, these are great. I love these answers. These make me very happy. You're all doing an excellent job. This is a great group, and this makes me very happy. Let's see. Elizabeth, why don't you read out your favorites so I can take a drink of water?
Yeah, okay. My favorite is bikes okay this way, and bike lane approaching. Those are great answers to this question. But as Mr. Kevin will tell you, the Shero means.
Yeah, that's the thing, is the 2 most common answers I get when I ask this questions are bikes are allowed to use this street, or look out for bicycles. And I like both of those answers because both of those answers are true. However, both of those answers are also true even if this symbol isn't painted in the street. Even if there's no symbol, you should still be looking out for bicycles. Even if there's no symbol, bikes are still allowed to use that street. Bikes are allowed to use all the same roads that cars are allowed to use. So there must be something different about that specific lane. Maria says it indicates the flow of traffic. Sort of, because if the V's were painted the other way, it'd be pretty confusing. But always we're saying if you're driving on the right side of the road, then that applies to both bikes and cars. You should be biking on the right side of the road and driving on the right side of the road. Catherine says bike lane approaching. Look out, there might be a bike lane ahead. I like the idea of that. However, not exactly what we're looking for. Samantha's close with shared lane. And that's the closest, other than Carl Rudnick, who definitely knows the answer to this question. The only reason that a specific lane would have this symbol painted in it and another lane would not is because this specific lane is too narrow to share side by side with a car. It doesn't mean that bikes should ride specifically over where it's painted, because sometimes they'll stripe them a little bit too far to the right, too far to the left. It kind of looks like, to me, like a speed boost, like in Mario Kart. Like if you ride over it, then it makes you go twice as fast. We don't have that technology yet for e-bikes. So what it means is the lane's too narrow to share side by side with the car. If I know that the lane is too narrow to share side by side with the car, what does that mean? So when there's not a bike lane, when there's not a specific place for bikes to be, if you're in the street and the Shero symbol is here, as a car driver, whether the bicyclist is on the right side of the road, the left side of the road, the middle of the road, whatever, I should change lanes in order to pass them, regardless of their position in the road, because I know there isn't enough room to safely pass that bicyclist when they're in that lane. And as a cyclist, conversely, be I an e-bike rider, a standard acoustic bike rider, you get it, like acoustic guitar, electric bike, electric bike. No matter what my intention is, and I understand for sure, the reason I spend so much time on this is because your instinct isn't always to put yourself closer to the center of the lane. It can feel more unsafe. However, making yourself visible and discouraging unsafe passing means putting yourself closer to the center of that lane. This is the place that it's recommended that you be when the lane is too narrow to share, and this symbol helps you make that decision. So Carl has said, Sharo is shared lane marking. Bikes have approval to use the full lane. That's it, really. Now, as I said before, know what the law is, know what keeps you the safest, know what people expect you to do, because those can be three different things. And so the law, I want you all to be able to make decisions out of knowledge and not out of ignorance. So this concept of taking the lane, this concept of holding the lane, controlling the lane, putting yourself closer to the center of the lane comes with experience. The more you do it, the better at it you get. And so I don't expect everyone to immediately be able to do things that make them uncomfortable. I would never ask someone to do something that makes them uncomfortable. I would ask you to know what the law is, know what actually keeps you the safest, know what people expect you to do, and then make your own decision after that. I used to think that when I saw people riding their bikes on the sidewalk, it meant that they didn't know what they were doing. And what I've realized is what that means is there's been some sort of failure in the infrastructure. If the street was equipped with facilities that made people feel safest, then they would probably be riding in the street. And when they don't feel safe, they put themselves on the sidewalk. And the same concept can be applied to door zone riding. The same concept can be applied to a whole bunch of different things. So get the knowledge and know what it is that people expect you to do, and then make decisions based on that information. People like to give me the gotcha question of, Mr. Kevin, when you're riding your e-bike, do you actually stop at every single stop sign? I bet you don't. Ha 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 ha. And my answer is, I treat stop signs the same, whether I'm on an acoustic bike, an electric bike, or driving a car. I do the same thing. Is that thing that I come to a 100% full and complete stop at every single stop sign? Look inward. Do you come to a 100% full and complete stop at every single stop sign you've ever been to since you've started driving? No. You make a decision based on your familiarity with the intersection, the speed and volume of traffic, the time of day, all these different things. And so none of this in reality is black and white. And knowing that, remembering that is important.
Can I say something, Mr. Kevin?
Nothing would make me happier.
Okay, great. So, obviously we have all these signals, signs, and infrastructure to make the roads safer. We have different kinds of road users. Roads are for people, not just people in cars. And my word of advice is, yes, there can be a stop sign, there can be a yield sign, there can be the Sharo, but you have to assess your situation and communicate with other road users when you're out there. So, make eye contact, hand signals, just the communication and negotiation are the two really, really big ones, because you can assume someone will be coming to complete stop at a stop sign, but it's never safe to assume. So make that eye contact, put yourself in the center of the lane, make yourself visible, and just negotiate. I mean, that's really what keeps everyone the safest. So that's my advice.
I love it. I'm gonna, I always think to myself, Kevin, don't make this pun, but then every time I do. Here we go. So I'm gonna shift gears a little bit here. Ha 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 ha. I wanted to talk about making sure that your bike doesn't get stolen. This is a topic that people have questions about. It used to be that we said the lighter the bike, the heavier the lock, because lighter bikes were traditionally more expensive. Now it's kind of the opposite. The big heavy e-bikes are the expensive ones, but because they're big and heavy, they can carry big and heavy things. So go ahead and put that big thick chain around your shoulders and look like Mad Max. That's not something you would normally do on an acoustic bike, but with an electric bike, you have the ability to carry your heavier locks, and those are a good thing. Sometimes the e-bikes will have locks built into them. Those are cool. But I would argue, if you're serious about this, don't rely on just one. You can use that U-style lock that you see here. but you can also then pair that with a chain that runs through the bike itself. All this being said, there's no such thing as a perfect lock. There's no such thing as a lock that can't be cut. There's no such thing as a lock that can't be picked open. That doesn't exist. There's no such thing as a perfect one. So if that's the case, what do I do to keep my bike safe? It's not leave it in a public space, because I've heard that as an excuse from people before. Oh, well, I leave it and there's a bunch of people walking by, so then no one's going to steal my bike. No, people do it in broad daylight all the time. Parts of the bike are removable. And so the idea, I think, that I found that's the best is make your bike less desirable. If someone sees 2 or 3 bikes that look the same and have the same lock on them, but one of those bikes doesn't have a bike seat, they're probably not going to steal the bike that doesn't have the bike seat. So I know people that'll take the seat of the bike off and bring that into the office with them. They'll take the wheel of the bike off, bring that in the office with them. The most expensive part of an e-bike is the battery. And on specific brands, most brands that I know of, in some way, the e-bike battery is removable. And so people will take the battery off and bring that inside with them if they do have to leave it outside. Every single story that I've heard about a bike being stolen, almost exclusively, starts with the phrase, well, I was just going to leave it for 1 second. I had already pre-ordered from Starbucks. They already had it ready. I was just going to lean it outside, run inside, grab my coffee and come right back out. And when I came back out, the bike was gone. It takes very little time. If the worst thing happens, which is the bike is stolen, there is a way to make sure that people know that that bike belongs to you. You can register it on this service called Bike Index. It's online. Feel free to look it up. And the idea is you take the serial number, oftentimes underneath the pedals on the bottom of the bike, and input that along with pictures of the bike. And then if the bike does get recovered at some point, there is evidence that it belonged to you. So that's a good thing.
Can I
go
add
ahead.
something?
Yeah, please.
So another thing you can do, which I personally do, is I have an AirTag. It's an Apple AirTag. It's a tracking device essentially that you link with your phone, and you can try to hide it in your bike. So if it does get stolen, you can use the information, and we want you to be safe. So it's kind of a judgment call on your end if you want to go out and try looking for it. But I've heard a lot of good stories about the AirTag, and sometimes locking your bike isn't what am I trying to say here? Like, you can try to go into the coffee shop with your bike, or when you go sit outside, have the bike next to you, have your bike within arm's reach. Don't let it be vulnerable. Don't put your bike in that situation, because this bike is your vehicle. That's kind of the difference. Like, a bike is sentimental. It's your vehicle. So AirTag, and just have your bike in arm's length if you can, if it's possible. Or you can go in the grocery store and bring your bike with you.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? I was going to add something else, but I think you nailed it. So I think we're good. Yeah, and Carl says, if you're going to put a picture of your bike online, having a picture of you standing next to your bike is a great way to establish ownership. So I like that. Okay. I also was asked to talk about passengers and gear. My metaphor is, I ask, is there physically space for a human being to sit on the hood of your car? Sure. People don't drive around with people sitting on the hood of their car just because they have the physical ability to do that. And bicycles, and especially e-bikes, are the same way. Because there's physically enough space for a second person to sit on the back of this bicycle if they squeeze in nice and tight, that doesn't mean that they should. The best way that I know of to find out if a bike is actually designed to carry 2 people is if it has a place for the person to put their feet, if there are foot pegs. You can see on this one, it's very clear. They've got their own seat, they've got their own backrest. Even if it does have the ability to carry 2 people, that is a very specific type of riding If you've never done it before, the first time to do it isn't when you're already out and about and someone says, hey, let's just try it. It takes practice. It's its own skill. Turning is different. Stopping is obviously very different. You're, doubling the amount of weight on the bike that the brakes are going to have to deal with. So I am not going to deny that it is possible. However, there's a whole bunch of different things that come along with that. So be careful. This also, though, is where I talk about carrying gear and carrying things. When it comes to e-bikes, there's a whole bunch of different types, including e-cargo bikes. So, I mean, the ability to carry your week's worth of groceries on the bicycle is an option. Even without a specific bike that's designed to carry that, you can add racks, you can add things onto the bike where the weight is carried on the bicycle. I've seen people ride bikes with, a gallon jug of milk hanging from the handlebars by a plastic grocery bag. If you've ever tried it, it's very tough and not recommended. So getting a basket of some kind if your bike doesn't already have it, or as some people do, it's 10 years ago, it would be exceedingly rare, and it's becoming less rare to hear about people selling their car and just using an e-cargo bike to get around. I know it sounds crazy, but it does exist. It's a thing. Okay, let's see. Terry had a question about how to make yourself more visible when biking. And so this is a specific slide for you. When you see a car driving around, it's got a white light in the front and a red light in the back. Headlights in the front, red lights in the back. The same, I think it makes a lot of sense, is true of bicycles. A white light in the front, a red light in the back. The white light helps you see what's coming up. The red light helps other people see you. And the red light helps other people see you. There's the white light in the front, there's the red light in the back, there's a couple reflectors that are required, but these things are the very, very bare minimum. There's a whole bunch of extra stuff you can do. You can trick the bike out. I know of one system where it's got lasers that shine down on the ground and shine 3 feet away from the bike, so cars know how close 3 feet is. I know that you can put lights in the pedals and make it look like Pac-Man is chasing you, whatever else. As long as you're not, shining strobe lights in people's eyes, making yourself more visible is encouraged. Reflective tape, stickers, lights, there's all kinds of different stuff. The bare minimum is just that. And going above and beyond that is highly recommended. Yeah, make your bike cool. Before I go to helmets, I'm going to put this up just because Terry also had a specific question about turning and making left turns and right turns and things like that. I will say, before I get into specifics of this, this is the e-bike specific class. We touch a little bit on a whole bunch of different topics. Another class that also does things like that is our Commuting 101 class, our Commuting 202 class, our Bike Friendly Driver class. At the end of this presentation, I'll have a slide where you can sign up your workplace and we can come specifically to you to talk about all kinds of specific topics. But since it was asked, I will address it. When making a left turn, do you suggest using the crosswalk or the left turn lane for cars? A couple different things. I love the way that question is worded, and specifically the idea that the left turn lane is for cars. It's not. Roads are for people. Roads are designed to move people, not just to move cars. But it's a common question of, if I'm riding my e-bike, I'm riding to work, there's a situation where I need to turn left, how should I do that? I can think of like 5 different ways to turn left. One of them is to turn right and then make a U-turn, and now you're facing left. One of them is to go straight through the intersection and then make a right turn and then another right turn and then another right turn, go all the way around the block, and now you're facing left. Another way is, yes, completely get off the bike, become a pedestrian, hit the button, walk across the crosswalk, and now you've got all the rights and responsibilities that a pedestrian has. It's definitely not the safest way, and it's not the recommended way. It's not the thing that people expect you to do. It's not the thing that keeps you the most predictable and the safest. In general, well, my answer to every question that I've ever been asked starts with, it depends. And so it depends. But in general, where would I put myself if I was on a motorcycle that could only go 20 miles per hour? If I was planning on turning left, I wouldn't do it from the right-hand edge of the road. I would merge across traffic lanes and put myself in the left-hand turn lane and then turn left. That being said, it depends. The speed of traffic, the volume of traffic, your familiarity with the intersection, how comfortable you are, all those things come into play. But make a decision with the knowledge that the thing that you're supposed to do, the thing the law recommends that you do, the thing that keeps you the most predictable and the safest is making a left-hand turn lane, making a left-hand turn from the left-hand turn lane. Does that work? How did I do, Elizabeth?
Great.
Cool. And keep those questions coming in because I'm seeing them and they'll be addressed at the end. So if you have anything specific, please don't hesitate to put that in the chat now. Okay, as I said, I have to talk about helmets. The thing that this is controversial. Are you guys, can I get a little controversial with you? Are you okay with that? We're going to get weird. You ready? Bike helmets are only important right before you hit the ground. There's a bunch of other things you can do to keep your head safe before you're in a position where your head is about to hit the ground. And those are the things that I've already talked about. Things like lane positioning, things like predictability, things like making yourself visible, things like communication, as Elizabeth mentioned, making it so that people know what to expect of you. Those things are all as important as wearing a helmet. Almost half of all bike crashes occur as completely solo falls, just you completely on your own, no one else around you. It's the most embarrassing type of fall, but it's also the one that's helped the most by these bike helmets. A low speed crash, you took the turn too fast, you know, unexpected something in the road, whatever, you go down. Having a helmet is extra important in those situations. My top 3 reasons, as you can see, are 1, it obviously makes you look super cool. 2, it actually does keep your head safer when you do fall. And 3, yeah, it is the law. If you are under the age of 18 or you're wearing or riding one of those class 3 e-bikes. That being said, the law is the minimum. There's no law that specifically says I shouldn't put my hand in the microwave, but I'm not going to do that because that's obviously a crazy thing to do. And in the same way, if we're putting on any kind of ride, if we are having an event that you're involved with, any kind of class, whatever, we require everyone to have helmets. It makes sense. There's no good reason not to that I've heard. And wearing it in the appropriate way also. This kid is wearing his helmet incorrectly. Can you tell? It's way too far on the back of his head. If he falls forward, he's going to hit his forehead. So making sure you have the helmet and you actually are wearing it is extra important. Okay, Alyssa, can you unmute yet? Did we figure that out?
I just asked you to unmute.
Maybe.
All right, I'm unmuted.
Yeah, go for it.
Yay!
All right, sorry about that at the beginning. I was hoping to give a big intro to Kevin and what a great educator he is, but I got the mic working now. So I did just want to take a note to mention that this class, along with the classes that Kevin mentioned, like Bike Commuting 101, Bike Commuting 202, those are all part of SANDAG Sustainable Transportation Services and part of the employer commuter program. So I do want to encourage people to visit SANDAG's site, sandag.org, if you are interested in, as Kevin said, having any more classes like this one, specifically at your employer site. But the slide here that I'm covering is the Guaranteed Ride Home program. So this is one of the great services that's offered. If you're a bike commuter or considering starting to bike to work, this is something that I would encourage you to sign up for. It's free to sign up. And if you do so, then if you get stranded at work, perhaps you have a mechanical failure with your bike. I've had that happen to me before where I am ready to head home and I have a flat tire. So if you sign up for this, then you can get reimbursed up to $100 3 times per year if you end up needing to take an Uber or a Lyft or transit or a taxi to get home because, you know, say your bike's not working. So I'd encourage you, if you can scan this code right here and go ahead and sign up for it, or you can look it up on the website. We also are excited to announce the Bike Anywhere Day, which is going to be May 18th. So you might be more familiar with this as being called Bike to Work Day. So it's pretty much the same thing, except we're trying to expand it to more audiences, to include young people, to include people that maybe aren't just biking to work, but are biking for other trips. So this will be on Thursday, May 18th. And just like last year, we will have pit stops in the morning, over 100 stops throughout the county. So we encourage you to scan this code or visit the website and sign up to take the pledge and join us on Bike Anywhere Day. And finally, here's more scan codes. If you want to stay up to date on some of the projects that are happening throughout the region, you've probably noticed there's a lot of new separated bike lanes bike facilities that are going in, lots of new bike infrastructure that's popping up all over. So if you want to stay up to date on that or check out and get some information on it, then you can visit the website sandag.org/bikes, or you can scan that code here. You can also follow on social media if you want to get kind of more up-to-date information on what's happening around the region. And also there's an email if you are interested in getting connected in anything that I mentioned. This is just a general gobybike@sandag.org email that you can send us questions at. All right, any questions on anything I covered or anything that Kevin or Elizabeth talked about? I think we still have, about 10, 12 minutes.
Yeah, at this point, I'll take questions on anything at all. You've got a wealth of knowledge here between Elizabeth, myself, and Calissa when it comes to the services that are provided, but also the specifics of e-bike laws, rules, best practices, things that you're confused by. You've been a great crowd, so I'm going to go ahead and give you unmuting privileges. Please use your responsibility wisely. But you can put those questions in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. I would not feel like I did my job if I didn't get at least one or two questions. So if anybody's got anything at all, just as a personal favor to me, it would be helpful if you could come up with a question or two, anything at all. I didn't cover every single thing that you wanted to cover. I know I didn't. I don't have enough time. So something that you thought I would talk about, but didn't, anything like that at all. Please feel free to unmute, put it in the chat.
I missed the first part, but I was wondering if you recommended any e-bikes, or do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, as far as specific brands go,
Yes.
we're not sponsored yet. So if someone wants to give us $100,000, then I'll talk to them. But at this point, the main recommendation I'll have is one, don't be afraid to buy used. But if you are going to do that, there are certain things to look out for. Make sure the bike hasn't been in a crash before. And we have more information about that in our Bike Commuting 202 class. When it comes to specific brands, the only thing I'll say is in this situation, this is not a time to scrimp and save excessively. Be a savvy buyer for sure. Do your research. But this isn't a time when I would recommend getting something shipped from overseas because it's only going to be $60 for this e-bike. You're probably not paying enough for an e-bike at that point. There are local shops that offer these things, and they are more than happy to say hi to you. If you have, leave your wallet at home so you're not tempted. Just go in to say hi, check out what they have, and don't purchase something without trying it first. The way that these things handle is different across different e-bike types. Where the power comes from, be it in the wheel or in the bike itself, in the front wheel, in the back wheel, is the motor activated by torque? Is the motor activated just by pedaling? Is that throttle a thumb throttle or a hand throttle? All of that stuff are questions that the e-bike shop can answer for you. If you're down in South County, Rad Power is a great one, but your local bike shop is going to have more information about all different types of e-bikes, and do your research. And once you've found something you've liked, it's an investment, but it's an investment that will absolutely pay off. Steve says, any comments on liability insurance for e-bikes? The thing I've heard, there are specific companies that like to offer that type of liability insurance, and you can look into those if you'd like. I know homeowners insurance and renters insurance will cover some of that stuff. And so again, in the same way that I haven't been sponsored by anybody specifically, I'm not going to give out any specific names. But I will say that yes, those services do exist. And if that's something you're extra worried about, you can get specific liability insurance. However, oftentimes that is covered by renter's insurance or homeowner's insurance. Carl says, what about schools requiring bike education to ride and park at school? Yeah, this is something that I've heard about, especially with some schools in the North County. They've started instituting this plan of, if you want to ride your bike to school, you should have some sort of form of education first. And then once you have that, you'll get a special sticker on your bike, and that'll allow you to park your bike at school. I'd be against that if those classes had any kind of barrier for entry, because I want to make it as easy as possible for everybody to use their bike. There isn't a requirement that someone have a bike license before they ride a bike. I think that that's a good thing, and I can talk for about an hour about why. But when it comes to these schools requiring some sort of bike education, if they do want to ride and park at school, I'm okay with it, especially when they invite us to come in and do the presentation to kids, and that counts as the education. Make it as easy as possible. I don't think that education is a bad thing. I think that having any kind of barrier is a bad thing. And so we want to make sure that people are getting educated in a way that's easy and convenient for everybody and equitable across the entire county. Before I take my next question, I will draw your attention to the link that's been posted in the chat. Go ahead and do me a favor, just click it right now. You don't have to fill that out immediately. You can wait until after the presentation's fully finished. But if everyone could take just 1 or 2 minutes to fill out that post-event survey at some point today, I would appreciate it. Do you see any e-bike regulation for e-bike ownership coming to San Diego as a response to e-bike battery fires that happened out of New York City? I know it's rare, but it's gotten a lot of attention based on reporting by the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. Yeah, that's a flashy headline. E-bike battery explodes and burns down building. I'm not surprised that that's something that gets coverage. I remember when the hoverboards were popular for like a year and those were all exploding. That's a thing that happened too. E-battery technology, as these batteries are getting bigger and more powerful, and they're putting them in cars and they're putting them in e-bikes and a bunch of other things, quality is especially important. And if you're skimping on something and you're getting your hoverboard from, Wish or, Alibaba or whatever, then you're probably not getting something that's backed by a warranty. You're not something that's backed by a specific company. And so when bad things do happen, that is more of a problem. So in the same way that just when I'm talking about generally spending more for an e-bike is probably a good idea, it's also a good idea because of the quality of the battery. And a good quality battery will not explode. A good quality battery won't have any problems with it. They're putting them in cars, they're putting them in bikes, and they wouldn't be doing that if they weren't safe. If we don't have this problem as much because our weather is fairly temperate, but in places where between one day and the next, it could be, 95 degrees or 25 degrees, those are times when it's definitely important to bring the bike inside, have it covered, not leaving your bike in direct sunlight. Don't hit your battery with a baseball bat. These are common knowledge things. Be safe when it comes to using these devices. A car has the ability to have problems with it. A bike has the ability to have problems with it. An e-bike has the ability to have problems with it. So regular maintenance is also extra important. Again, that's another reason why it's a good idea to spend the money on an e-bike and buy it from a local shop, because when you do have those issues, hey, I'm a little bit worried my battery gets a little bit hot. Hey, it's not charging as fast as it used to. You can have that physical space to bring it in. They can diagnose those problems and solve them for you pretty quickly. Elizabeth, what didn't I cover? How did we do? Is there anything
Did we talk about riding on the sidewalk?
Briefly?
Okay.
There's actually,
that.
yeah, there's a couple different, surprisingly, there's a couple different schools of thought when it comes to this. As I said, I used to think when I saw people riding on the sidewalk, it meant they didn't know what they were doing. Now I know that it means that there's some sort of failure in the infrastructure. It's a good place for a bike lane to be put in, probably, if people are on the sidewalk. Kids oftentimes are riding on sidewalks. People that aren't confident are riding on sidewalks with the assumption that it will keep them safer. Every driveway is an intersection. Every driveway is a place where a car has the ability to interact with a bicycle or a pedestrian, and they're not looking for fast moving bicycles. And I guarantee you and I have the same experience. Imagine to yourself right now, you're leaving a driveway from your car mid-block. You're planning on leaving that driveway and turning right. What direction are you looking with your head? You're looking to the left. And so if there was someone approaching quickly on the sidewalk, you're supposed to look both ways before you cross the street. That's not a thing that people are doing as often as they should. They're looking for where the traffic is coming from. You shouldn't ride your bike on the wrong side of the street. And as a car driver, you shouldn't assume that no one is riding their bike on the wrong side of the street. There's a percentage of bike crashes that occur when someone is on the wrong side of the street and they're hit by a car that's turning right. That could be avoided by, yes, the bike driver not riding on the wrong side of the street, but it also could be avoided by the car driver looking in both directions and making sure it's actually clear to enter the intersection before they do that. It's illegal to ride your bike on the sidewalk in a residential, it's illegal to ride your bike on the sidewalk in a business district. It's legal to ride your bike on the sidewalk in a residential area, at least in the specific city of San Diego. That rule can vary. I was told recently that there isn't a specific rule that says that e-bikes are not allowed to ride on the sidewalk in a situation where a standard bike is. E-bikes are considered bicycles for all intents and purposes, and therefore follow all the same rules as a standard acoustic bike. All that being said, it's called a sidewalk. It's not called a side ride. It's called a crosswalk. It's not called a cross ride. Bikes are not allowed to ride in crosswalks. That's not what this infrastructure is designed for. So putting yourself in a place where people expect to see you is always going to be a good plan. Making yourself visible and predictable. Roads are for people, not just people in cars. Those are my main topics. We got 120 seconds. And so I think we can go ahead and call it here. We're on social media. You can find all of our email addresses if you look for them hard enough. This recording and other recordings like it are on YouTube. So if you want to get just a 1-minute video about how to use roundabouts or start your bike or whatever else, we have that information on our specific webpage. And then SANDAG's website has all kinds of information when it comes to commuting and getting around the world in a multimodal fashion using more than one type of transportation, something we highly recommend. So that, I think, is where I'll leave it. I appreciate you all sticking with me for the full hour. It's been a pleasure. And don't hesitate to reach out if you have any follow-ups or you felt like I missed anything. That's it. Don't forget to take that poll, click that link, and we'll see you on the road. Thanks a lot.